Now, also,
we do want to sell you up, but do we want to see that as another form of rigging?
No, it may not be another form of rigging. These are human systems, and I know that there could be problems. There could be desperate.
If anyone deliberately disenfranchise anyone, maybe in an area, known for one that those amount of PVC targeted for a particular area, and you decide to steal them, go dump them somewhere by not giving it so many people opportunity of casting their ballot on that day. It would seem more as an advantage to whoever is carrying out such action.
Absolutely. So what the INEC can do is to dynamize the process, just as I was saying, such that if the PVCs for some reason are not available to potential voters, there has to be a manual way, an alternative way of accrediting them, so that people in the last analysis will have to vote. So I think that we now clearly have 4 full years to do this, and I think it's well within our capacity to achieve this. But you see, if we wait until it's 5 minutes to midnight, then you see people running all over the place. Contractors can't even deliver for over 500,000 PVCs. Then I have a problem with that.
Yeah, maybe that's why people will say that it's now time for, as you rightly say, and maybe manual. Remember, one of the things that INEC is looking to, go back to, because even for these elections, when politicians were saying, can we use TVCs with PVCs, because a lot of people wanted to collect their PVCs, but were not able to. There were a lot of, instances that people were going to be disenfranchised owing to no fault of theirs. And INEC said no. We have to do with what we have on the ground, because they know the antics of politicians. Even in spite of these PVCs and card readers alone, there are still instances of the number of voters being more than the number of people who were accredited. It raises big questions as to how the process went, because if you say that the process started in the morning and people were supposed to be able to get accredited up to a certain time and then vote afterwards, how come is it that the number of ballot papers counted at the end of the day were more than the number of people accredited?
Ultimately, technology aside, you cannot purge fraud from the hearts of men, I think. And technology can't help that. So what I think we should do, in addition to this emphasis on technology, is massive citizenship education. People ought to be able to know that if you're going into public office, you're going there, or you ought to be able to go there to serve, and that you shouldn't go there by fraudulent means. And then those who are also going to be voting need to understand that, look, in addition to simply voting every election cycle, we also have the citizenship responsibility to hold those who occupy public offices to account. This kind of technological determinism, where people simply say the technology will get everything right, I don't subscribe to that. I believe in the human agency. I believe that what we should do, we can't possibly abdicate to technology to solve. We need to make sure fraud lies not in the technology so much as in the hearts of men.
Very true, but the second question will be, how do you then address vulnerable areas? And in the areas of Lagos, for instance, that I managed to go to see how elections were being conducted, because we're in the studio most of the day. But after the elections, after the program or my own shift, going around and just seeing, observing, it looked very civil. It looked like, some people, citizens in that area had taken ownership of the process. So that even when technology was failing, they were able to step in and still ensure that the process was accountable and fair to all. But the thing is, if there are many areas where that sort of agency will not exist, say in rural areas, for instance, not because the people cannot, but because they could have people more powerful than they are, people in authority, taking ownership of that process, and also, making it very fraudulent.
I think that strengthens the points I made about voter education. We must make it a continuous, citizenship education process. Let the people, whether they live in rural areas or whether they live in urban centers, be aware that they have a fundamental right to cast the vote, and for that vote to count. If they do that over 4 years, we need to make sure that we have this citizenship education. Wherever you are located, make sure you are civil, make sure you understand the elections for what they are.
How feasible is that, considering that poverty is also one of the things that comes to play?
But the government has interest in keeping the people poor. The kind of poverty we have in Nigeria is state-sponsored poverty. We have no reason to be poor. You see, the nature of poverty is that the poorer you are materially, the less likely you'll be able to make certain choices. Issues about accountability accountability, democracy, good governance become very remote issues because you're more obsessed about daily issues and tussles of survival. So the poorer people are, the less likely that they will ask the fundamental and probing questions. So that is why you see that people tend to, governments, especially unaccountable governments, have an organic interest in keeping the people poor. Because the poorer they are, the less likely that the process will hold them accountable.
All right, let's wrap up with this one. Which key thing strikes you, and how do you suggest we correct it in those states that are very contentious, that had, even the ones that had the elections subsequently now, plus the ones that had it before?
Well, you know, I can speak a bit more seriously about River State, for instance, because I am from there and I know what happens there. Fully, what happens there. No, I didn't vote there. Luckily, I don't have to vote there because the nature of citizenship is that you can't be a stranger anywhere within the borders of the country. I am here in Lagos, but I follow very keenly what happens in Port Harcourt. In River State, for what I found, very revolutionary, if you ask me, by Nigerian standards. The people are not so much concerned about the APC or PDP. The votes that we saw in River State was a complete repudiation of the legacy of Chibuke Amechi's government, the catastrophic, disastrous administration that Amechi's government has been. You see, when you have a government, for instance, that cannot provide a glass of water for people to drink, even if you received over 3 trillion naira over the past 8 years. As I speak here, as I sit here, salaries in River State have not been paid since March. You know, pensioners have not been paid since April. So the point I'm making,
just to add to this, if you say this is the situation in River State, then there shouldn't have been any kind of violence. The elections would have just been an overwhelming, support for any alternative government that is coming to take over from him. But so how do you marry that with the amount of violence to the extent that people died in that particular election?
Yes,
truly there was nothing on the ground by this particular government.
Good question. You see, anywhere there is about to be change, anywhere the people are about to express a massive anger against the government, there will be violence. Who orchestrated the violence? I can't tell. It will have to depend on investigative bodies to do that. But what I can tell you categorically is that there's, during the electioneering campaign, the governor of River State always made it clear, like, look, this has nothing to do with party politics. This is a referendum on my own government. And the result is in. The result is that the people have completely repudiated the government. And I suspect this has nothing to do with the APC. It has nothing to do with the PDP. In fact, it even has nothing to do with the APC candidate, Dakuku Peters, whom I understand is a nice man. But this has been a complete repudiation of the kind of misgovernance that we've seen in River State. We are talking about a state where, you had 3 trillion naira over the past 8 years, and the people have no glass of pipe-borne water to drink. You have spent over 200 billion naira to build a new city, and there's no such city for anyone to see. We spent over, just a second, we spent over 90 billion naira to build a monorail, and there's no monorail for it. We're talking about the government by fiction.
It's a debate that they will also like to participate in and then bring out what they've done. But unfortunately, we can't do that today because we don't have them coming up. So, and perhaps when INEC also publishes the report of how people voted, then we could also do a content analysis based on that report. But in the meantime, I want to thank you for coming on. Dr. Tam-George is the Director, Institute of Communication and Corporate Studies in Lagos, and also former lecturer, University of Cape Town, South Africa. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thanks for having me.
All right, I'll be back in just a moment. We've got another perspective on this matter. Don't go away.